Alright, I'm going to give you all a rundown on how I rebuilt the front end on this truck. The bushings for the front axle. Basically, it's the 14-piece bushing kit is what I did. I replaced every single bushing in the front of the truck. All the way from right there, that torsion arm bushing, to new tie rods. New bushing right here for your sway bar. And then I think that was all the bushings in the front that I replaced. But those right there are a pain in the ass. The torsion arm bushings. And I'm going to tell you how I replaced them. And taking it apart and putting new bushings on is easy. As far as bolting this stuff back up, that's the hard part. Because when you replace those bushings, along with those bushings right there in the front, you have to roll your front axle from the truck. You have to roll your front axle. So you roll it away from the truck. The first thing you do is loosen those two bolts right there on both sides. Then you come up to your shock, undo both the bolts on the bottom. You just let the shock hang from the top bolt. You will have to disconnect that brake line junction, if you can see it. That right there, that junction of brakes. And you could also loosen that screw right there on the top of the diff. Loosen that screw and that'll loosen that whole junction up. But you still got to disconnect the junction. And the reason you do that is so that way that line right there doesn't get in the bind. Because that runs up through the frame and that'd be more of a pain in the ass to disconnect than that junction. So after you get the brake lines done, get that loosened up, get the bottom of your shock loose. You go ahead and that clip right there, you disconnect this. It's this screw right here with a nut on the back side of it. And then over behind that is another bolt. And it might be like that one upside down or not, I don't know. But I put these in brand new. And if you're looking for these new clips, the only place I could find them was Bronco's graveyard, as well with that lower coil spring cup. The original cup has a two-piece that come together and just kind of set together, and they bolt on top of each other. Whereas this one from Bronco's graveyard is a one-piece, and I think for that clip and the lower cup, it wasn't but $100-some, like $110 or whatever for both, all four of them. And then the next thing you're going to disconnect is this right here. I will come in from this way behind the spring with a impact gun, and then you can hold it. You can hold that nut right there. Usually that comes apart pretty easy. Then you can just take a hammer and smack it down if it stays stuck. And after you disconnect that, you do this right here. Well, I have a drop down one, even though the truck doesn't need it. But you take your pitman arm and disconnect that, and your steering shock right there as well. And then you can just kind of tie those to your other tie rods so they're not dragging the ground or whatever. So that way they're not in the way. And after all that's disconnected, your coil spring should be just setting in there without the clip on it. And you will start to raise the front end of the truck up. Now I'm lucky because I got the tube bumper, but you raise the front of the truck up, the actual body of the truck, and those coil springs should just fall right out of that cup they're setting in. And when they do that, you can actually go ahead and finish taking the nut off right here in the back. Finish taking those off all the way. And with two people, it's a lot easier. You're one person on each side of the truck and just push on the tire and roll the front rear up. Now those will start dragging the ground. Not that it matters since they're old, but mine are painted, and if yours are painted, you don't want them dragging the ground. But yeah, after you get the rear rolled up, then you're ready to go. You just start taking everything apart, putting the new bushings on. Or you do like me, put new brake lines on since you're disconnecting them anyway, and they're cheap. Along with new coil spring cups. You're probably going to need new coil spring cups because they rust out like no tomorrow. Now I'm going to show you the way I put the stuff back together. After I put all new bushings on and had the bushing right there, that axle bushing tightened back up, put the coil spring back on, Well, I did not put the coil spring on. I put the coil spring cup back on. And what did I do? I had the, yeah, the truck was still up in the air. The body was still up in the air. It's been a while since I've done this. But how I got those back into there, because it is very, 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 very hard to just try and roll the rear end back to exactly where it was. I took a ratchet strap, and like I said, I'm lucky I got 2 bumpers. I took the ratchet strap, wrapped around my 2 bumper here, and it went, as you can see, straight up there. I don't know if it'll be, it should be just as easy with a bed as well. So, even though I don't have a bed, but I ran that strap all the way up there, in between the coil spring cup and the ball joints right there. And continued to ratchet it up, and you have somebody up there putting the torsion arm back in the hole, and it'll line itself right back up. You can draw it up tight as you want. Then you just come to the other side, do the same thing, and then your truck's back together. Because honestly, the hardest part of replacing the front axle bushings on this thing was trying to put the truck back together. But now I know how to do it, it's pretty easy. And like I said, the other stuff comes pretty easy. The hardest part will be trying to get that torsion arm back in. The only other hard part will be this coil spring. And as you see, you can just barely tell. But up here, the coil spring looks completely straight and flat. You see down there, it's kind of making a bend. The coil spring is actually setting like that sideways in the truck. Just like it is, just like I'm looking at it right now, that's how the cup is setting. So the spring actually kind of does a little bit of a bend. That is a pain in the ass to get back in, but once you get your torsion arm back lined up. And actually, I remember now, when I was ratcheting back that torsion arm back in, I had my coil springs in the lower cup, not bolted up top yet, and they were just kind of flailing around over here where my hand is, and I had to push them over and in here. But I don't remember it being that bad. The hardest part definitely was putting that bad boy right there back together. And also, don't forget, this piece right here I didn't paint. It's actually got, see that little space in it right there? That's actually supposed to be spun down a little bit more to go with that other groove, if you can see it. Yeah, you can just barely see it. But you need to keep up with that, because that helps lock in the bushing. And on this side, I didn't actually put the lock piece back the way it was supposed to be. I kind of missed it. But since I've tightened it up, it hasn't moved back to off or anything, so I'm fine. But there's a bushing on this side, a thick washer, bushing, and then another washer surrounding them, washer in the middle. It's pretty simple. The shock will go right back into place. The brake lines will line right back up easy. But hopefully that helps somebody out, because there's not a lot of videos out there on these